Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. A very warm welcome to you all and wishing you all on the first Monday of October a very happy World Architecture Day. Hope most of you are back at your workplace and keeping healthy and safe and have adopted well to this new normal during this unlocking phase. It's my absolute pleasure to welcome you all to today's webinar. Canadian Wood presents Woodinnovations celebrating architecture and design. It's heartwarming to see such a fabulous response to this webinar series brought to you by Architect and Interiors India. We can see the numbers swelling. Thank you for taking time out and being here today. My name is Indrajit Sauji. I head the construction and design vertical for ITP in India, and I'll be your host today. Let me begin with a brief about ITP. ITP Media Group is one of the largest foreign media companies in India. The group now publishes more than 100 weekly and monthly magazines and has a wide portfolio of market-leading digital properties. Some of our well-known global titles includes magazines like Harper's Bazaar, Vogue, Time Out, Cosmopolitan, Grazia, Construction Week, Architect and Interiors India, and more similar prominent titles across industry verticals. In India, we have 7 titles, including Architect and Interiors India. Architect and Interiors India is our flagship title and is among the most respected and widely read B2B titles in its domain. And as we gather today to celebrate World Architecture Day, we are fortunate to have galaxy of stars from the design industry with us to take us through the journey so far and guide us what the future looks like for us. We are looking forward to an interactive and engaging session and need your complete involvement. And to ensure this, we'll take a few questions during the session. For those who want to ask a question, we have enabled our Ask a Question feature. It's on the control panel at the bottom of your screen. So if you have any questions, just type them there. I promise we'll try to answer as many questions as possible. And if you miss anything, don't worry. We'll be sending around an on-demand recording to your mailbox, and it will also be available on our website as well. Without any further delay, let me introduce our partner for today's session, Canadian Wood. Thank you, Canadian Wood, for partnering with us and for helping us run this celebration today on occasion of World Architecture Day. We have Nirmala Thomas with us representing Canadian Wood. Nirmala Thomas is Director, India Market Development, Forestry Innovation Consulting India, FII India. That's that we know as Canadian Wood. FII India is the market development agency for promoting Canadian solid wood lumber from the certified sustainable forest of British Columbia, Canada. With over 17 years of experience in strategic marketing in India and internationally, Nirmala leads FII India's educational and direct outreach activities to a wide range of audiences. Her rich experience of working in different roles with varied industries brings to the table a sound understanding of the market and its requirements. She is an engineering graduate with a post-graduation in international marketing from University of Pune. Nirmala lives in Mumbai and enjoys spending time with her family. Now, without any further ado, let me hand over the forum to Nirmala. Nirmala, the forum is all yours.
Thank you for the wonderful introduction, Indrajit. Good afternoon, everyone. I just will take a quick few minutes. Welcome to this webinar, Woodinnovations Celebrating Architecture and Design. Today, the first Monday of October every year is celebrated as World Architecture Day in parallel with the UN World Habitat Day. This idea was originally created by the International Union of Architects, UIA, in the year 1985. By choosing the theme Clean Environment for a Healthy World in 2021, the International Union of Architects hope to contribute to the global conversation on the 2030 development agenda by focusing on 3 key areas, that is housing, public spaces, and their relation to climate change. We would like to appreciate the great work architects do and the potential they have to better the world. Marking the occasion of World Architecture Day, we take a moment to consider the potential of sustainable architecture and its ability to transform the lives of human beings across the world. Sustainable architecture is nothing but a reflection of the choice of building materials, construction methods, resources used, and design in general. Today, we celebrate Architecture Day by taking time out to learn about the wonderful works of architecture in India through our esteemed panel members. Before I hand it over to the next speaker, I just will quickly run you through a short presentation on Canadian Wood and its story and why we believe Canadian Wood is the right choice when it comes to using certified wood from sustainably managed forests of British Columbia, Canada. Please allow me to share screen. So Canadian Wood, also known as FI India, is the crown agency of the government of British Columbia.
We are a non-profit organization with a mandate to educate and promote use of BC forest wood products. Can you go ahead, please? Yeah, as you can see from here, Canada is a nation of forests. It has 10% of the world's forest cover and has the highest certified number of forests in the world. So if you can see from the slide here, British Columbia is the westernmost province of Canada and has 40% of Canada's forests present here. It houses some of the largest lumber companies in the world, some of them namely like WFP, West Fraser, Canfor, Tolco, and Interfor. So just sharing statistics as available on the government website, annual harvest generally does not cross 200,000 hectares, which is seen as a small dot. And that is what we actually harvest in Canada. It's just a 1% of the entire forest land. From the slide itself, you can see British Columbia is recognized as a global leader in sustainable forest management. As seen in the chart above, British Columbia ranks third in comparison with Canada as number one. So in fact, the country and the province itself are leadingly certified. So that itself justifies strict international certification standards like FSC, PFC, make Canada a reliable and sustainable provider of wood products. Canadian Wood has been actively promoting wood as a sustainable source of raw material in various applications through its 5 legally sourced species, namely Western hemlock, spruce pine fir, Douglas fir, yellow cedar, and Western red cedar. Canada has strict forest laws and policies. About 94% of Canada's forests are publicly owned, and this enables the government to regulate harvesting practices and land use planning. If you can see from the picture here, the small patches of land where there is no forest, that's the small piece of land or the forest that has been harvested. You actually won't be coming back to this place for the next 80 to 100 years because that's how well managed the entire system is. It is a well-known fact in Canada that for every tree that is harvested, 3 new saplings are planted. So the whole logic behind this is that even if 2 saplings do not make it, at least 1 is ensured. So it is for every tree cut, there is a tree planted. And these are planted in nurseries and managed and looked after till they grow up to 7 years of age. These saplings, which you saw nurtured in the nurseries, in the previous picture, are now planted back in the same environment where the harvesting of trees takes place. So this allows the biodiversity to be maintained along with the regrowing of forests. So the entire ecosystem, whether it is the birds, we just don't cut trees and plant them elsewhere. It is planted back in the same environment where it is harvested from. Everybody knows that forests and trees are the world's greatest carbon absorption tools. This continuous endless cycle of carbon absorption, this management of growing and harvesting trees in a controlled cycle helps take carbon out of the air and store it in different forms of products that we use in our everyday life. Name it books, name it furniture, name it construction material. This is all carbon absorbed in the air and stored. So it is a very well-known fact, as trees grow when they are young, they continue to absorb carbon, but when they start aging, as they die off, they tend to release. So it is a natural cycle that you cut down mature trees, not young trees, so that when you actually are taking out carbon from the air. It's also important to know that India loves wood, and the fact that India needs to import wood because we are a fiber deficit country. So Canada thus provides a reliable source of sustainable, certified, and versatile lumber. We truly believe use wood from wherever you want, whether it's local, domestic, or imported, but make sure that it is coming out of sustainably managed forests. I think this wood miles picture is what we have, our research scientists in Canada have kind of captured it. Even though it does take a certain carbon footprint to get wood from Canada to here into India, but still the amount of carbon dioxide that has been captured negates whatever has been lost in while shipping it. And so just quickly, possibilities are endless with wood. What we call as reimagine with wood. Wood can actually elevate architectural projects, achieve sustainability goals, and create inspiring structures. Just sharing with you as pictures now, a couple of works made by different architects in India, what we call as made in India, made with Canadian wood. So this is the Palette Pub in Bengaluru, captured by architect Ketan Javdekar. This is the CPT University in Ahmedabad with one of our first projects where we installed glue lamp Douglas fir beams. This is a private residence in Himachal where a post and beam kind of truss frame structure was used in construction as well as interiors. This is a WFC house, what we call as a wood frame construction standing. It's a two-storied residential house existing in Mysuru, a WFC house in Chennai, and that's a beautiful piece of, the circular staircase that you see all made in wood. This stands in Chennai. A WFC house in Mysuru, this is what we call, Peter would term it very well as modular and portable. We had it installed, we broke it down into parts and had it installed at the exhibition. It's currently standing in Mysuru. This is another small one studio cottage style WFC house in Bengaluru. It's if you ever are there, you could probably just drop in to see it. It's fully fitted with interior furniture. This is one of the WFC houses in Hyderabad. It's actually a commercial project where a customer actually wanted to build in wood and has used this design. We've captured it out of that. This is a tongue and groove resort style Goa house. It's ideal for getaway as a getaway home. And next slide shows you also the interiors. This is the interior fit out of the same TNG style resort house in Goa. And this is, I think this has been showed before. Yeah, next slide. Bell Museum in Trivandrum, where he's used both the wood paneling out as a cladding outside as well as in the interiors. This is Taj Rishikesh, where they have used Douglas fir and hemlock as into their different interior fitments in their door frames, and beautifully done. You must visit this place. It's a beautiful piece. And lastly is the Sitaram. Next slide, please. The Sitaram Ayurvedic Resort in Kerala, which has again used Canadian wood. Just wanted to formally open the webinar before we proceed with the panel discussion. I would like to introduce to you Annabelle LaRouche, Councillor Commercial and Senior Trade Commissioner, High Commission of Canada in India. Annabelle is responsible for managing Canada's trade, investment and innovation relationship with India, as well as with Nepal and Bhutan. Prior to her assignment in New Delhi, she was Councillor and Trade Commissioner at the Embassy of Canada in Seoul from 2016 to 21. From 2014 to 16, Annabelle also worked with the Canadian missions in EU member states to promote the Canada-EU Economic Trade Agreement. Over to you, Annabelle. Please, go ahead.
Thank you, Nirmala, for the kind introduction, for the great presentation, and also beautiful example of wood construction. Good afternoon, everyone. First, I'd like to thank Architect and Interiors India and Canadian Wood for inviting me on the occasion of the World Architecture Day. It's a very special day. I'm very pleased to be part of this webinar, and I commend Canadian Wood for bringing together eminent personalities from the world of architecture to share their knowledge and their expertise. I'm part of the Trade Commissioner Service, or TCS, a Government of Canada organization helping Canadian companies navigate international markets. In India, we have 8 offices across the country and about 50 officers working towards facilitating cross-border trade and investment between Canada and India, including in the forestry and the wood sector. India is one of Canada's most important trading partners, with a total economic partnership that we estimate at around $100 billion. As you all know, the COVID pandemic has changed the world in many ways. And this change includes turning us back to the use of environmentally friendly products like wood, and not just any wood, but wood from sustainably managed forests. Proudly, as Nirmala mentioned in her presentation, Canada is a world leader in this area. Only 10% of the world's forests are certified, but in Canada, about half of our forests are. This means that Canada alone accounts for over one third of the world forest certification, far ahead of any other countries in the world. Further, Canada's forestry sector uses almost 100% of every tree harvested. With wood chips, sawdust, and bark, we make products like toilet paper, masks, hospital gowns, bioplastics, textiles, and biofuels. And we ensure sustainable forest practices by planting 600 million seedlings per year. From building taller with carbon storing wood to using wood chips to make bioplastics, innovation in our forest sector is decreasing our carbon footprint and ensuring that Canada remains a leader in the forestry sector. I would like to leave you with one message. As one of the largest producers of softwood lumber and a leader in sustainable forest management and forestry innovation, Canada is uniquely positioned to meet India's growing needs for wood products. I thank you all for being here today. I wish you a very productive discussion. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. Over to you, Nirmala.
Thank you very much. I would now, without taking much of time, I would hand it over to Sumisha. Sumisha is the editor for Architects and Interior to continue with the panel discussion. Please, over to you, Sumisha. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nirmala. That was a lovely start to the evening. It was enjoyable to see your presentation. And it was an absolute pleasure to hear from you, Annabelle. Thank you for joining us today. It's now time for the most awaited panel discussion, and it gives me immense pleasure to be seated amongst the finest architects of the country on this occasion of World Architecture Day. We often tend to take architecture and our surroundings for granted, and thus this day has come into existence. Architecture Day is a day to show appreciation for the work of architects and celebrate their contribution to their society, to our society. Today's session by Canadian Wood and Architect in Interiors India is our way to bring the spotlight on the future of design and architecture and reinforce the need to look at sustainable architecture as mainstream. We want to encourage more and more young architects and designers to take up the responsibility of building with natural materials like wood and discuss the innovations that can be brought about using this fabulous material. We also want to reinforce the need to look at procuring materials through sustainable and ethical sources. On that note, I would like to introduce you all to our esteemed speakers today. Our first panelist is none other than architect Tony Joseph, principal architect, Stapati. Tony established Stapati in 1989, which has steadily grown into a multidisciplinary practice emphasizing values of integrity, sustainability, and innovation. Tony is also the founder chairman of Avni Institute of Design, a center for excellence in architecture and design education. Welcome, Tony. Next, we have architect Ravindra Kumar, a crusader of urban design in India and a patron of sustainable location-specific architecture and design. He is also the director of design at Venkataramanan Associates and principal architect, Pragra. Next on our panel, we have architect Ini Chatterji, principal architect Ini Chatterji and Associates. He currently practices architecture from Goa and has been working with coconut wood for 15 years now. Next, we have architect Siddhartha Das. In 2002, Siddhartha founded the multidisciplinary practice Siddhartha Das Studio in Delhi that works on responsible design and cultural space. He has worked with over 2,500 craftspeople across 15 states. In fact, over the last 20 years, he has worked on more than 100 projects across 8 countries. He is also the vice chairman of the JD Center of Art, Woodinnovations. Next, I would like to welcome architect Arjun Malik, principal architect Malik Architecture. Arjun is the second generation architect at Malik Architecture, a practice established by his father Kamal Malik. He has completed Master of Science in Advanced Architecture Design at Columbia University and has been working with Malik Architecture full-time since 2005. He has contributed tremendously to the growth of the firm in all spheres. Our next panelist, Eugene Pandala, is an architect, urban designer, and heritage conservator known for buildings with biodiversity, inclusive environmental sustainability. Welcome, Eugene. Last but not the least, we have Mr. Peter Bradfield, who's the technical advisor of Forestry Innovation Consulting India, which is FII India, or as we all know as Canadian Wood, since 2015. With over 40 years of international experience in the Canadian forest products industry, Mr. Bradfield leads the technical and educational approach in the use of Canadian wood in demonstration and commercial projects in India. A very warm welcome to all of you, and thank you once again for joining us. I'm now going to straight dive into our conversation. Just a note for all our lovely viewers, if you have any questions for our panelists, you can put them down in the chat box, and I will try and address them as and when I can. Let's start the discussion with the most pertinent question. And this one goes to you, Mr. Chatterji. How is the pandemic going to impact architecture and design in the coming years?
I don't see any linkage actually in that sense. I mean, unless if there is any at all, it would be people would start preferring a rural lifestyle as opposed to an urban one. And then it would change the architecture and the materials, I guess, then, you know.
I'm sure a lot of people are now looking at sustainability as more mainstream, and I'm hoping, and we're all hoping, that more and more people start focusing on sustainable architecture and using sustainable products like wood in the post-pandemic phase as well. Ravi, you work on a lot of large-scale projects and sustainability projects. Would you like to define and tell us what does sustainability really mean to you?
I think what is very important is not to, like Letta said, go blah, 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 blah. It's very important that we have to introspect exact engineering evaluation. It's not about the aesthetic or the understanding of how much you have actually captured the momentum of being an architect or making the space architectonic. Mm-hmm. I think it matters a lot in terms of how we get our numbers right, whether you use timber. So what is the source of that timber? What is the accurate footprint of that in terms of the transport consumption? That if it comes from Canada, what happens? So every material needs to have an energy kind of a evaluation criteria, and also understand as to what happens to that material once the structure completely dilapidates and goes back to earth. How much of that will actually become earth, biodegrade and become earth. So I think these are pertinent questions for us, which is very simple. And actually, if you look at, one of my lecture topics, which I love to do, is fast forward, which means if you go back into time, you learn better than actually going forward to time. So people did that very consciously and accurately. And we need to become more passive in our methods to approach problems. And then I think we are accurate, sustainable sort of persona for the planet.
Absolutely, I agree with you. Siddhartha, how would you define sustainability from your point of view?
I work largely in the domain of culture and context, of how do you really link livelihoods, people and places. And when you do that, the whole idea, the premise is that there's a responsibility and sensitivity of how do you really, relate to people and then to resources, especially in a country where we have such amazing disparities, where there's such amazing lack of access. So that any resource that is used, even if there's an indulgence of the resource, it's used with great caution. Mm-hmm. And I think lies this whole relevance of ecology and of using sustainable wood. So I think it's part of any ecosystem that there was. And I think there's a whole erosion of those systems, which are cyclical in some ways.
Absolutely agree with you. Arjun, what you are aware of the trends globally, especially in the US, in Canada, and Europe, you've definitely had access and have been working around. A lot of people are now moving towards using wood in their projects. So what are the benefits of using wood in place of steel and concrete, in your opinion?
First of all, I'm not really aware of trends all over the world, and I'm not exactly sure what the word trends means anymore. It implies something very short term. I think what Ini has said and what Siddhartha has said and what Ravi has said, it kind of sums up the attitude towards sustainability, right? Part of it is number crunching, part of it is materials, part of it is, ecology and sociology, part of it is economy, and it's contextual. Obviously sustainability in the developed world, American or centric, is very different from sustainability in places like India, more developing nations, where we have to be very frugal in our consumption of resources, where in other places you apparently seem to consume more and more in order to save, which is something I haven't quite gotten my head around. So I don't think it can be kind of shoehorned into a single set of buzzwords, which is I think what the media industry keeps looking for. But I think it needs to be a concerted, analytical approach from numerous viewpoints. There is no one single weapon to deal with this in a sense.
I absolutely agree with you. So if you had to define sustainability for the future, what are the parameters that you would look at, and where would come in that picture?
I just told you it can't be defined and you asked me to define it. Look,
so parameters is what I was looking at, yeah.
Look, obviously, looking at natural resource, material resource, the ecologies or the human resource used to mobilize those natural resources, looking at supply chain logistics. I think it's all kind of out there, right? I think it's just a question of how you tend to use it. There's very little that can be said about the principle of sustainability. It's just a question of how motivated you are, how committed you are to the cause in terms of applying those principles. And look, everyone would love to work with natural materials, right? Why would an architect choose to not work with it? I think there are limiting factors in terms of there is cost. We are talking about supply, provenance accreditation becomes a problem when it comes to engineering. I think engineering knowledge becomes an issue, right? Execution becomes an issue. Right? I already mentioned economy, which is the major one. So I think you're still seeing it in India, I think, kind of being mobilized at a slightly smaller scale. Whilst when I was fortunate enough to travel with, Canadian who took us across to Vancouver, and we went and saw a lot of projects, and you're kind of seeing how a society is now, right from the forest to the installation to the recyclability, so the complete cycle, right, is being refined to the kind of level where I think we have a lot to learn, in terms of how we can adapt those strategies into our mainstream, not as, boutique applications, because that's just a little, it's just a little pebble in the pond. It's not going to do much.
Absolutely. I think motivation is the key word, like you mentioned as well. Mr. Joseph, would you like to tell us what are the different wood species that you've used in your projects, and which ones, and what is your thought process behind choosing them, since you work so much with wood?
I'm sorry, I've yet to use Canadian wood. Yeah.
That's all right. What have you been using so far and your experiences?
Mostly it has been upcycling. I think the projects which I have been doing are mostly resorts and other things where we use a lot of wood, and mostly a lot of recycled wood is being used. I think when we talk about recycling, that is one of the beauty of wood, is that you can totally recycle it, upcycle it. We use it in various ways, and if you look at the old houses in Kerala, they were all wooden houses, and one of the most majorly one of the wood which was used was called anjali. We call anjali locally. It is a type of wild jackwood which was used, and as it ages, it becomes really beautiful and it really hardens, and it has got wonderful quality now. We have reused it, and I think after 150 years, we have taken those wood and we are reusing it, and I'm sure it will survive another 100 years easily. So that is the beauty of wood. Naturally, nowadays a lot of imported wood comes, like pinkoda, and pinkoda is from Myanmar mostly, which is being used because of the cost effectiveness and the characters. And teak, of course, is something which has been used a lot in Kerala. Then in various cases, can I show some images?
Sure.
Can we just run through some of the ways we have used wood?
That would be nice.
This is one of the projects which we had done about 25 years back, where most of the wood you see are recycled wood, except for the ones, the rafters there, which is pinkoda. It is all recycled wood, which we got from older houses which were being demolished and sold. So a lot of the wood which we have used for recycled. This is a project in Goa where we have used pinkoda, which was a wood which I told you earlier is being used because of the cost effectiveness. And what we understand, it is a plantation wood, it is being, So this shows some of the drawings which can see how when we make a drawing, the way we use the wood, how we do that.
Very beautiful.
Again, this is a project where every material in this project itself was recycled. And here what we have used is arecanut trees. And this is a wood which was usually thrown out. And we have used this arecanut wood here, which these guys who make these galleries, they use it after once this project, this was a temporary thing for one of the Binale pavilions, which they reused it after this event was over. Yeah, this is the same wood being used as the arecanut wood, which is very rarely used for major timber constructions, being used in the elevation of a project. This is how the old houses were, the old wooden houses. This is one of the houses which were dismantled, and you can see the areas where that old wood was used. I think these are the one house, the wood from that one house was used in various parts of a new construction which was happening. So effectively, every bit of that wood was used. That is the beauty of wood. I mean, it is carbon footprints are much less than that of steel, and then then the wood itself can be reused. Yeah. So this is even for the furniture there. This is one of the projects which we have been working on with a firm in the US, Studio D+R. This is in Los Angeles. Here we were actually looking at cross-laminated and glue lam wood being used for a ground plus 5 structure. So this is actually this construction. We just started working on that, and these are some of the initial presentations. So it's interesting that here my friend and I, we decided that instead of steel, we should there are houses there in LA which are using ground plus 2 and ground plus 3. So we wanted to see whether we could use it on a higher, much taller structure. Yes, and this is a furniture which we are doing again, upcycling of old wood. It is for a brand called Smaram, which we have been working on. Yeah.
That looks really interesting, and of course we've all been, and there are people in the audience as well who are talking about the resorts that you've designed. In fact, we have a question that has come up for you, where they're asking that there is any damage due to termites in wood, especially like wild jackfruit used in Kerala. Would you like to take that?
Yeah, I mean, naturally, if you see the idea of this, the furniture which we are talking about, and where we use that wood, especially the recycled wood, the beauty of that was all the effect of what you call it, termite on that wood. I think that was quite beautiful, actually. I mean, once we, after we took it and naturally treated it, it is not going to be affected anymore. But it was wonderful to see the work of termite on those wood. So when we used it, we actually left it as it is. So that adds to the quality of that, I mean, so it all depends on how we are using it. But if we do the right treatment, I don't think there is any issue of termite. Yeah. I mean, these woods have lasted more than 150 years. So, and if it can last 150 years, and I think the way I'm sure that when we are using it again, it lasts even more than that. And it is all about how you treat the wood, and how you approach designing with the wood.
Absolutely. I'm sure that's a big challenge, and that's being addressed as well when you're using the product or using wood for the construction that you're doing. Mr. Pandala, I would like to know from you that, what are your thoughts on using wood for large constructions particularly? And what are the advantages of using wood?
I am very conservative about using timber, because I love timber, but I feel that timber can be used in a place which is really appropriate. Especially if you're using new timber, I prefer to get it from a source which is sustainably cultivated. Sort of cultivated timber is what I prefer. In fact, in Kerala, we get teak wood. The Britishers, fortunately, they planted quite a humongous area of teak in the state. Those days, they wanted to use teak as a building material for ships, and later on we started building with steel. So cultivated timber in Kerala is available. It's available, but it's too expensive. It's when you're talking about affordable sustainability. Sustainability is something which we are talking now. About people who can afford to use a lot of timber lavishly, but I always feel that sustainability is something which should be made affordable, because it is just not the choice of materials, but also to do with biodiversity. Because the whole process of making a tree, manufacturing a tree, it is really encouraging, because it's just not producing any carbon footprint. It is only capturing the carbon dioxide actually It's helping the environment and it's mitigating the global, the problem that we have right now. So timber can be used, it should be reused. And timber structures, we have amazing number of timber structures which have been pulled out and used as a furniture piece, it is taken to build resorts. I also do that at times when nothing else is possible. If the people decide that they can't maintain that house, they will really try to pull it out. So my initial way is to sort of to keep it there, to help them to conserve it. And if it is not possible, then we try to transplant it into some locations like what Tony said. So we can transplant it. But, actually retrofitting that structure, making it livable for the next generation is much more challenging. And I've done a couple of projects like that. In fact, I can also show you some slides. Shall I share some slides right now?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, this is a very large project. I've used timber. I've really used a lot of timber in this structure, but I used where timber is required. In fact, wherever it's visible, where you want to show timber, I use timber. Okay. And where I can do without timber, I use steel and other kind of, wherever there is a need for using, concrete, I use it in a very minimal way. Only in places where it's absolutely required, I use concrete. So all the materials that is locally available is a thing of my first choice. And timber, of course, because this particular project, I was to tell a story, to take a journey through the cultural and natural heritage of this area. So I had to do the roof has to be, made, in the local way, where I use timber to showcase the beautiful possibilities of timber. The roof is partially done with, steel. Steel is used. Wherever it is, exposed, wherever it is showcased, that is done with the steel. Especially timber is so beautiful a material, and traditionally it was used in certain, systems of construction like this. This is a radiating rafter, a structure made with radiating rafter, and the corner rafter itself is about 30 feet long. So it's a big challenge, and the carpenter, the kind of artisans to build this kind of structure. Nowadays, I don't think you can get anyone who can build this kind of radiating rafter. A lot of details. So timber, in this case, I wanted to showcase this, the old structural system that was so beautiful. And it became an important element in the structure. So this is also a part of a building which was sort of taken out from a different location and is transplanted. Not without losing much of its glory, but using it. And we made some little bit of modifications to suit that kind of requirement, and we used it. And this is another interesting project where I had a beautiful opportunity to use waste timber. My client had a lot of timber, which was. This is the kind of roofing system that I was talking to you about. The portions of the tile roof is made with steel, and the rest of the areas, whatever is shown, is made with timber. This is a radiating rafter, the kind of the structure which I was talking to you about. The kind of traditional design which is quite difficult to implement. And this is a slide I was talking to you about, getting an old structure, into the project area and reusing it. Okay, so I'll just go to the next slide. This is a project which I was just talking to you about, after I didn't know that you could see that slides there. Okay, this is a project which I got an opportunity to sort of work with waste timber and steel. Mm-hmm. This was done in Panna, in Madhya Pradesh. So there was a lot of timber and steel, and that was a resource which I was supposed to make use of. And I could design. This is an opportunity for me to design a structure with all wood. Even the recent one which we did, the roof also is made with timber. Indulging with timber, it was a big opportunity because that was all waste. So I managed to do a design for instead of using tiles, I used timber. So this is salwood. And the kind of buildings that we had in Kerala, one of timber, one of the most beautiful things is that you can make prefab structures. You can do it in a factory or in a place, and you get the craftsmen to do the work. And so we had to design the whole thing, then get it done, and it was brought to the site and it was assembled. And this is a deck, which was left exposed to the atmosphere, done with timber. I could do some rustic work and all timber structure, which is which forms a part of the landscape. And even in structures where we are making walls with something else, you can go for wherever it's possible. The waste timber can be utilized for making artifacts. If you notice the lampshade, that's the portion of the timber. You could have an assembly of waste branches and put it together. The ceiling can be used. Can be made with timber, like so. Another project which was quite interesting is that a 300-year-old structure which was to be pulled out, an old structure. They just asked me what I can do with that. So it was basically a kind of engineering task to retrofit it, improve the living condition. Increase the height, make washrooms, make a leaky roof better. Increase in height and making the spaces bigger and meaningful for a new kind of lifestyle. So we used jacks to jack it up, increase the height, and improve the house. This is it's a very nice process which we did to bring back the building for use and restored it, to the possible way. The beauty of a timber structure is that it's so amazing. You don't have to do much on the texture, and only thing that we had to make a bit of tweaking on the interior spaces and add on certain fenestrations.
That's really
so that is it. These are the kind of this timber is a beautiful material, and it's when you manufacture it, especially what I'm talking about manufacturing is if you're cultivating timber, it's not only just dealing with a carbon footprint. It's also becoming a host for biodiversity. It's also, we know only about what is happening above the ground, but there's a lot of things happening below the ground. Every tree is interconnected, and it becomes a very important thing for the biodiversity to thrive in a low location. So I feel timber can be used. It's one of the best material that we can use, but it should be replenished. Timber is something which we can replenish. It's not like other material.
Absolutely, Mr. Pandala. In fact, that presentation was quite interesting. It was nice to see the different variety of projects and woods that you have used across categories as well. I'm sure all the other panelists would agree with us. On that note, I would also like Mr. Ini Chatterji, you use a lot of coconut wood and you've been doing so for the last 15 years. So we would like to see some of your works as well in coconut wood, and also if you could tell us why have you particularly chosen coconut wood for your project?
Yeah, why coconut wood is an easy thing. It's kind of a agricultural crop. People in India plant millions and millions of coconut trees to benefit from the fruit and whatever else it gives. It gives many things. But there does come a time when it's old and about to fall down. that they harvest it. And if you just go by statistical, if it lasts 70 years, then 1/70th of the population of coconut trees dies every year. So it kind of makes sense to use it. The thing is that it's not really a tree in the traditional sense. So it doesn't have the structure of wood. It's like more like a pipe with a very heavy wall thickness. So it's in how you cut it and how you extract the wood from a coconut tree well, it's something you have to learn. I did spend a long time doing that.
Absolutely. I would love to see some of your projects.
Sure. I'll just get someone to put it on.
A lot of people have these queries that they didn't realize that wood could actually be used to bear the load of an entire structure. They always thought of wood to be used aesthetically. Would you like to elaborate on that as well?
Yeah, so this is like what you can see here are coconut wood beams, which are fixed to a concrete structure. These are laminated coconut wood beams, like, because you don't get very big piece of wood out of coconut, like cross-section wise. So these are about 16 mm by 65 mm, a hell of a lot of them. And then there's a kind of, go to the next slide. So I use Fevicol, which is just white glue to join all this. I don't have much faith in it, so I also bolt the beams together. And the rest of it is all about how do you fit the beam to the concrete, and that's my trip. So I enjoy doing all that. Yeah, so this is the other thing that I enjoy is like the members are so effectively light that just two guys can just deal with it, like it's not
very labor intensive.
Yeah, it's not really. And you can be very accurate and you can be very gentle with how you go about doing your work. You know what I mean? I mean, you can take your time to set it up. It's not much of a problem. These are old pictures of when the house wasn't really complete. But my mother asked me to build a house for her. And she had lived in Kerala for many years, and she was going to come and live with me in my land. And she didn't have much money, and I was new to Goa. I have no reason why I actually chose coconut wood. I just somehow did some calculation about the price and how much wood I could get out of it, and it seemed to work for me. It was very cheap those days. It was about like 100 rupees a cubic foot for a trunk, for a log. And I had a woodworking machine, so we could sort of work the log down into pieces. And we did some furniture with it just to check out, like, what is this thing? Like, how does it really work? And then we figured it's really very strong. I mean, as long as you use the right parts of the tree. It's very heavy, and it's very durable. So then it led us to this sort of a structure, which you can see here. It's entirely out of coconut wood. These are laminated beams. These are laminated columns. I mean, these are kind of built up C beams. But yeah, it's all just wood and screws, bolts. This is all sort of during the construction, but it reveals a bit more than the finished thing next. Yeah, so this is what really turned me on. This is the first time I was building with wood. And when you see this coming out of the ground, you really don't feel like you harmed the planet at all. And again, this is the same thing. It's light. You can just clamp it together, sort of take your time, join it properly, very gently, without making any noise, etc. That's my relationship with wood. I used to make lots of things with wood even as a kid, but that was my relationship. And especially with coconut wood, it's a new one, but I'm really hooked onto it. It's like I have used imported Russian pine and Scandinavian pine and spruce and stuff. It's very convenient. It's even cheaper than coconut now. There's less labor. It's like it works. And I've built a small resort with that as well. There is some sort of skepticism about it being softwood. in India. You know, most carpenters have no respect for it. They like hardwoods, you know, or heavy woods. They sort of go like this. Oh, it's very light, you know. So, but yeah, I mean, I enjoy pine and cedar, especially. Yeah.
That did look fantastic, and I would love to see that structure at some point in time for sure.
Sure, sure.
Arjun, there's a question from the audience for you, where you mentioned that there is a issue along with execution of using wood. There is lack of engineering knowledge, and they want to understand from you that what can be done to change the current scenario, and how can people be educated to use wood correctly.
Okay, so before I kind of answer that question, I just wanted to say something about, you know, what Ini said. And it's been a long time since we met, about 4 or 5 years. He very much us into the home that he had just finished building for his mother. And, you know, I got a lesson in how to deal with wood and how to treat wood and how to work with it. It was quite a priceless experience, both in terms of the conversation, understanding his methods, and of course, being in that space. I don't think any of those pictures will ever do it justice. I know Indy is a very private person, so I don't think too many people are going to get into that house, but we did, and it was a rare privilege. All right. So I'm going to just, look, I'm going to answer that question. We talked about workmanship and engineering knowledge through the course of just running you through these images. Just a quick prelude to one of these projects. It's 2012. This is in Alibag, about a 15 to 20 minute boat ride from Bombay. We worked on a long and narrow site for a friend who really wanted to live with nature, right? So right from the concepts to the architectural formations to the materiality to the techniques, everything to be in consonance with nature. And, you know, a fairly heavily forested site. You can see one of the concept diagrams. We simply detected space between the trees, right? There were lots and lots of very, very old, very mature, very tall trees on the site. So we simply detected bubbles and spaces between them and said, this is where the house is going to happen. Now, using the language of Konkan architecture, which has been around for centuries in this region, it's, you know, it's Kerala, it's Maharashtra, it's down the coast, even to Goa, of working with timber, terracotta, you know, we decided to process and this make a little bit more closely to understand the rules, because the moment you shift away from, you know, more conservative building materials like concrete, you kind of need to recalibrate the way that you look at design, the way you engineer design into these components, and to kind of discover the rules of the system and then find where you can either hybridize or mutate those, you know, those systems. So, we know that Mangalore tiles have to be fitted in a particular way, you know, the double layered ventilated tile system onto a, you know, approximately 1 foot spaced wooden batten system, which is then supported by a 2 foot spaced rafter system. But the networks below that can then start to actually drift away from the typical post and truss systems and hybridize into something that is a combination of the truss, post, and frame system. Right, some of the axonometrics that really start to detect, you know, appropriations of tree branches and tree trunks as the primary load-bearing system of the house. And yeah, I mean, you know, what we've used is we've actually used flitched members here for the primary load-bearing. So that's thin steel plates, structural wood sections bolted together. I did notice in some of Ini's work, perhaps not as much as this, but I think that combination of steel and wood actually allows you to, you know, look at a very different spatial logic, you know, and the way that you can translate structures into that logic. Otherwise, if you want to translate slightly larger spans into wood, then they start to get very, very heavy, bulky, you know, expensive, sourcing those members. So working with flitch sections, at least for the primary and secondary, and then using the rafters and battens as natural wood. And yeah, I think once you start to detect ways in which you can work with the, you know, primary structural systems, it completely opens up the way you can design and build with wood. And now the woodwork here was actually executed by a team that we brought down from Kerala because, as you may have seen with Tony and with Eugene, those guys are experts at the subject. And we didn't want to take too many risks because it was something that we were learning as well. I'm going to take you through another project which was actually done through, where the structural wood was done through a local carpentry team. So as far as the engineering and construction goes, look, we have excellent woodworking teams, right, within the country, but I think most of them have been pushed into working with furniture level, doors, windows, floorings, roof claddings. Very few of them now are working with, gravitational and seismic systems in structural wood and in hybridized steel and wood systems. So, and I think that also carries over to the engineers, where they're all, tigers when it comes to concrete and steel. But the moment you take them into softer, natural materials like wood or stone or brick, they tend to forget their basic engineering principles. So we're certainly looking towards our international counterparts for some of that knowledge sharing to be brought into this country. And yeah, those are some of the finished images of the work. So yeah, of course, apart from the primary systems, we did look at the louvre systems, also in wood, and kind of opens up the possibility of combining different structural techniques. And learning from that project, I think this is something that is more recent, completed in 2016 in the Western Ghats, very close to Bombay. Now, I'm not going to get into the why the house and how the house more kind of step into the wood part, but it's a heavily sloping site. Once again, working at levels, working within spaces offered by the forest. And here we actually were able to take the structure and make it even more radical, because we were kind of freed from the minor constraints of the terracotta tile system, which simply wouldn't work when you started to mutate these roofs to be able to follow the slope of the land. And yeah, it was interesting working with a wonderful set of engineers, developing detailed drawings for this structure. Once again, working with a combination of flitched rafters or flitched members and solid wood sections. This was sol wood. We got some of it was new sol wood, and I think the rest was from shipbreaking yards in Gujarat. So if you track it from the top left, moving right into the bottom, we simply analyzed how a traditional pitched roof, as it had to start adapting to slopes, adapting to heavy wind speeds, which means heavy rains, having to stretch its wings a little bit further and start to mutate its geometry as it flows down the hill, tracking essentially the occupied platforms and the slope of the land. You can actually see how those roof forms start to mutate. And translating that primarily through flitched wood and working with zinc over here. So we obviously had a lot more flexibility with regards to the geometry of the wood. But again, you can actually see that it's tremendously versatile in the way that it can be used, particularly if it can be combined with other slightly more high performance materials. With regards to the kind of sourcing of the wood, I do think that we tend to be engineering wise a little bit conservative, because at least with local woods, we're not quite sure how it's been processed, how it's been treated, has it been adequately seasoned, has it been tested for compression, cracking, moisture, etc. So we tend to be a bit conservative, and I do again sense that kind of knowledge sharing with whether it's the Canadians or the Scandinavians or the Japanese, in terms of being able to be slightly more precise with the engineering of this wood. But we were able to, kind of work again with these hybrid tree-like forms and the branches to completely open up panoramas to the forest beyond. And again, just working with, local carpenters, and it's amazing the kind of craftsmanship that we have locally available. It's just a question of maybe challenging them, taking them out of their safety zone, because most of these guys are delighted working on actual load-bearing structures, like this, as opposed to simply doing, doors, windows, railings and claddings. Yeah, and once again, just engineering. If you have these beautiful views on one side, you can actually just support and cantilever the structure of the other, and I think that the possibilities are absolutely numerous. You're connecting back to a structural material, and I think all the benefits of timber have already been outlined. So I'm not going to go into that. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it.
That was fantastic, Arjun. Honestly, it's so great to see timber being used for modern structures as well in a very contemporary style, and that some of those projects definitely did make the cut for that, and it was really nice to see that. Mr. Pandala, yeah, we know your love for vernacular architecture, and Arjun just showcased how we can also use wood in a very modern manner. But still, there is a lot of resistance towards using wood in our country. Why do you think that is the case, and how can we address that?
Yeah, I mean, resistance, maybe it's there because of the cost involved the environmental cost, and also the cost of timber, which is available for it's available for people who can afford it. Absolutely. But the small problems like white ants, people are scared of using certain type of timber. But there are certain type of timber which is not affected by termites. So I prefer to use that. If you treat timber by using, if you're using pesticides, I feel we have to use very safe, pesticides. So we have to show what we are using. So we have to actually build very cleverly so that this white ants doesn't come up and get a place in the timber from where it can really eat up, because that's looking for its food. So naturally, we have to take care of it. We have to use our intelligence to sort of make it. If you are willing to sacrifice, then it's okay. But otherwise, we have to be very careful. There are a lot of safe chemicals and treatment systems which we can use.
And like you rightly said, it's also down to the architecture and the engineering. If used rightly, I'm sure you can get the effect that you are looking at as well.
And plastic substitutes are coming up, which mimics timber. So I don't really appreciate that kind of thing. There are, like, some people make timber like plastic just by polishing it and removing the texture. They really spoil it. They love showing a polished kind of situation. It's like plastic. Absurd. But timber should be shown as timber. It should have a look and feel also.
Absolutely.
It's not, yeah.
Absolutely agree with you. In fact, Peter even mentioned by some of the panelists earlier and in the audience that there is a lot of people who are asking about the carbon footprint of India importing Canadian wood, or for that matter, from anywhere. Would you like to address that question?
Yeah, thanks, Samisha. Let me apologise in advance. I've got one of my neighbours decided to do some major renovation here today, so I've got drilling and banging. This may be why I prefer wood over concrete. I think Nirmala really addressed that subject about CO2. I mean, the work is done in the forest absorbing the CO2. Obviously, in manufacturing that log into lumber and then exporting the lumber by ship to another country, we sacrifice some of that CO2 credit that we've gained. But the net position is that by importing wood from Canada to India, it's a net positive result still. And unfortunately, India is a fibre deficit country, and the teak forests here have been overlogged, and the government rightly locked up those forests and those hardwood forests. There's a huge deficit in India in terms of wood for manufacturing and wood for structural use. I really applaud the architects today who are recycling wood, finding a use for coconut wood, using mango wood in furniture, all of those things, wonderful things. But even teak these days, majority of the teak being used in India is imported. It's coming from plantation monocultures in South America and and Africa and Asia. And unfortunately, it's the only solution. There's not any projects of scale or where wood is needed for manufacturing or building in volume needs to be imported. And there's lots of benefits in terms of the lumber that comes from Canada, in terms of specification, lengths being 8 to 20 feet, coming from sustainable, manageable forests, coming from a country with 0% deforestation, coming as sawn, accurately sawn, graded, certified, and even structurally graded wood. So there's lots of good reasons to bring wood to India from overseas. Canada's just blessed with these enormous softwood forests that are managed well by the Canadian government.
Sorry. Eugene has a question for you.
See, I have seen your initial slides, the slides which showed felling of trees, clearing of one particular area fully and, making it for fresh plantation. Instead, the forest department has a different kind of system where you can fell the trees not as a whole, not make it as a huge field, but if you can pull out few trees which are mature and which is pretty old enough from the bunch of forest, you don't make a ground like a airfield like what you have made for new cultivation.
I think you're referring to clear felling, and this is an age-old system, that's designed to control costs. But there's a lot of selective logging that takes place in the Canadian forest also. I 100% agree with you. No one wants to see ugly, clear-felled, paddocks or spaces on hillsides, but it just needs good management. And as long as we manage that well, and we consider the environment, we consider the public, then you can definitely log sustainably and economically. I think you were referring to the Indian hardwood forests just then.
No, actually, what you're doing, you're just considering the tree as just a tree. But a tree is just not a tree. It has got a lot of, it's a host, for various biodiversity. You have to consider that. So you cannot shockingly remove, a community of trees. Basically, it's a community. So it's just not, you're not seeing it as a living organism. That's a sad thing.
100% agree with you. And that's why we plant trees, the same species in the same area, and we maintain the biodiversity in Canada very much so. All of the forest we're talking about in Canada is natural forest. These are not plantations. These are not monocultures. We're not destroying the forest cover or the under part of the forest. In fact, we're only logging less than 1% of the commercial forest. There's so much forest which is protected in Canada, enormous amount. So if you consider that we're logging less than 1% of the commercially available forest, it's a very, very small amount, which showed up as a red dot on Normalist map. So
it has to be responsibly done.
Absolutely. Yes, I agree. And I think we can claim that. Yeah.
So Siddhartha, you are working on a project with Canadian Wood currently, if I'm not mistaken. What was your thought behind choosing a Canadian Wood?
Yeah. Can I just share my thing as a
Yes, and if you have any, you also work on a lot of cultural projects, so we'd like to see some of those as well. Yeah.
So the project that we are working with Canadian Wood is the JD Center of Art in Orissa. It's an amazing project for us because it goes back to the notion of what is art about and about how does it transcend boundaries and how does it bring people together. And especially in today's times when there are so many divisions that are more and more, I think, rampant. So with that kind of mandate, and especially in Orissa, so basically it will house the collection of Jatan Das, the artist. And the idea is that how can we do something which is not just about that collection, because the collection also has a whole variety of crafts and textiles and contemporary arts and an amazing collection of fans. So here there's an amalgamation of wood, metal, and textile. And it's part of the collection that travels. So it kind of brings together the JD Center of Art and the work we do with culture. And the building is designed very sculpturally by B.V. Doshi. So you have the kind of massing of the models. And then the way it has to kind of occur at the site. So the site is very beautifully undulating. It's rocky. And, and you have this kind of very lovely sculptural kind of occurrence. And it's Studio Vandro, which was associate architect with B.B. Doshi, and the whole engineering of it was by Mahendra Raj. So it has the same quality, I think, in some ways, and yet unique. You have this beautiful verdant green landscape in the front of Khandagiri caves, and you have this kind of undulating heights and play of light, but also you see kind of the rocky terrain, and it's punctuated with art, which is there. So there's a beautiful sculpture by Sharbir Rai Chaudhary, by K.S. Radhakrishnan over here under the Jamun tree. And that is the beauty of it, that the idea is to not really to tread kind of gently on the terrain. And that's the building of how it will look. And this is where I think our whole collaboration with Canadian work is going to occur in a large way. So we want to create spaces which are very experiential. And in today's time, I think when we say experiential, people just assume it's always technology. We embrace technology a lot, but we also want it to be about workshop oriented, where you have tools and the tools are used, and you have a workshop within the gallery and outside it. And so it becomes like a exciting, and I won't say just a classroom, but a kind of a thing where there's participatory, which is built into it. So that's so that's the fan collection, which I was showing you earlier. So the fan, textiles, and basketry come in here. You see very seamlessly the way the wooden furniture comes into play. And that's another gallery. You see, so the beautiful form of this, having this large heights and having a kind of a slattedness so that the light is less harsh, because it's a museum collection. And we spend a lot of time looking at the ecology of the building and how the site also. So we spent about a year with a physicist doing a thermal mass assessment and looking at the particle matter, the humidity and temperature. And I have to correct one thing, that I'm actually not an architect. I have the good fortune of working with architects, and in my team, and otherwise lovely people like here. But I am a designer by profession, but I interface a lot with architecture. So here I'd hired a physicist who actually did a lovely assessment for us. So we come back and think about how do you have cutouts in slab, and how do you have convection currents that flow through it, and also harnessing light in an interesting way. So how does the art really come in? And then how does the slattedness really add to the light, but not too harsh? And there's a whole play of that. So the beautiful kind of arches that Doshi had created, when he had this idea, but how do we make it in a way that will not be harmful? So here the wood comes in again seamlessly. So we didn't want to create very small kind of apertures at the top. And then the whole different structure of having kind of temporary structures. So that's the ticket shop and the security that people come through right in the beginning. That is something that we did in our studio ourselves. But again, this whole play and a beautiful multi-purpose hall, so that when we have artists in residence and craftspeople in residence, so the art center does not differentiate between artists and craftspeople, designers and architects. We want it to be something that celebrates the idea of creativity, and also without the idea of elitism. Many of us have the good fortune of having access. There are many who don't, and this is situated in Bhubaneswar, where access is a huge thing. And we want people to realize that celebration of creativity is when you come in there and experience it. So that's our kind of slatted roof and things. And again, there was a question that was asked is wood used as a decoration, and is it also structural? So here it's a play of both. We have a PEB building with wooden systems, and the entire exhibition system, when there's a gallery showing, then it comes into play. There's a film showing, it behaves differently. When there are talks, it behaves differently. I just wanted to kind of also weave in the whole cultural aspect of our studio's other work when you asked, what kind of projects do we do? This is a beautiful old heritage site designed by the architect in 1936, who made the Umaid Bhavan Palace. It's called Sardar Government Museum in Jodhpur. We were asked to curate and redesign it, and that's how it looks now after we finished. And that's other spaces. We kind of just opened up the space. And the same idea of responsibility. So we didn't have a single aperture in the heritage building. All our air conditioning is through the windows. Our lighting is 16 meters high. But also, how do you really work with, how do you tell the story and the narrative of things that you grew up with? This was a project at the Victor and Albert Museum in London. This was way back when I was younger with more hair. So a while from now. This is a lovely little exhibition based on a much larger project we're doing of interpreting the temples of Puri and Lingaraj. My parentage is mixed. I'm half Gujarati, half Oriya. So this is naturally, as an Oriya, this is quite important because these are two kind of iconic temples. But also in today's times when, there's this extreme amount of ritualic fervor with which people come and talk about temples. So we wanted to tread gently and, talk about the whole idea of the built heritage, the iconography, the living traditions, but also showcase it in a very modern way. So I met Canadian Wood after this project. Otherwise, this would have been a very interesting way to collaborate. But also working with craftspeople and talking about things, the way the films are made, the way the people made the things. So that's a beautiful architectural model that we did in collaboration with craftspeople. So one of the things which you mentioned, one of the things I really pride myself in is that whole trajectory of having worked a lot with craftspeople at the same time working in technology, of embracing both and having a reality which is of both. So there's a beautiful teak wood log which had been felled by an elephant in the forest, not far from Bhubaneswar, about 300 kilometers, sourced from the forest department, ethically. So that was also interesting. 100-year thing. We took the sculptors to it, to the sawmill, got the log of wood, and from this, over the next 16 months, something was created. But one of the things I think when you talk of ecology, Ini talked about coconut, Eugene talked about, not Eugene, Tony talked about using areca. I worked a lot with bamboo in our exhibitions and things, because it's a grass and it regenerates itself. I worked a lot in Tripura and Assam and Orissa and Delhi, and we do exhibitions which use bamboo quite a lot. But also for furniture, here's a kind of a knockdown bamboo stool. So sometimes it's repurposing crafts, but sometimes it's crafts the way they are with the same symbology and idiom. So this was something we showed at the 100% Design Festival in London. And then the other work, which is heritage-based, which is the Jal Mahal, and working with the kind of the traditional idiom of that area. So we often, when we work with heritage, we work within a radius of about 100 to 200 kilometers of the site. So that here, this entire thing celebrates the arts of the 19th century when this building was created, and the whole kind of working with it within the space. But contemporary things, there's a South Bank Center, where it kind of celebrates the arts in a very different way, or using film. And so this is, the entire scaffolding is made in wood, and it has textiles of different sheerness, and then the whole projection of sound and music within that space. And you see, again, the usage of wood over here, but of film and music again. This is with a Norwegian company, actually. And then the work we did with the airport, the Bangalore airport, where we created art for large installations. And basically, yeah, that's kind of just to kind of give a smattering of the work with culture, but also how does the wood really fit into it, and the idea of ecology, because how do you work with people and places if you're not sensitive and if you're not responsible? And and you can't then say that one is responsible and have an insane way of approaching it. So I think that's being the kind of the premise with which our studios worked.
Absolutely. In fact, I found something you said very interesting, is that a lot of people tend to relate innovation with technology, while actually innovation needs to be going back to the roots and using our traditional vernacular architecture in a more modern manner. On that note, I would like to invite Ravi to share with us some of his works and where he's used wood as well.
So more or less, I think I completely agree with most of the sort of critiques that we've heard today. But of course, I also think that we must be the voice that we walk and talk. Right now, I'm sitting on the level 3, which is completely a timber structure, 5-floor timber structure, which is our office space. We built 12 years ago using re-engineered timber and yellow balau and the waste that we got out of pulling down old warehouses where they had to do some old mills reconstruction work and stuff like that. So we started actually looking at a whole structure in a simple trabeation method without complicating the whole building, where we used very, very minimal steel. This was on 2 houses, which was built before independence. And that's how the office structure sits today, which is completely 5 floors. And we also have an amphitheater. These are precast concrete panels that we house on top of the timber structure, which is actually 5 floors high with a whole volume cut that happens in between. And there's a large tree that sort of gropes onto the terrace level, where we left that structure only 2 floors, but otherwise we have 3 floors, 4 floors of volumes that happens as office spaces. And you can see that it's a composite structure where we used simple method of trabeation and used only 2.5 kgs of steel per square feet and used largely compression member of timber. The whole window and the door frame, everything actually acts as a support structure, and it also houses an amphitheater which can have 150 people for a concert. So it is possible, and actually we realized that doing this way, we were destroying the local sort of area of constructability area into lesser degree. That was, we were not inundating the land. There was no cement, there was no mortar, there was no, chemicals being used, no resins, and everything is a carpentry joint and bolted systems. So it was fascinating for us as part of that experience. Even now, I'm sitting on a floor which is 2-inch thick wood, which came from re-engineered reuse, and that itself is the floor. There's no concrete there. And believe in me, it is cost effective. You have to go to the source. You have to go to the farmer to buy the rice. Then it works better. So we also believe from that point of time, like just a couple of weeks back, we harvested the first chop of timbers from our land. We grow 76 acres of land where we grow trees, not like a Miyawaki forest, but we want to grow enough trees that before I die, that whatever timber I've used, I would have put it back into the planet Earth so that I equate my number game. So having said that, recently a large project which we did for around 75,000 square feet, an old heritage building which was 130 years old, we had to actually completely pull out all the roof elements, all the window elements, and reuse every bit of that timber that was used in that particular structure, but added a bit of extra other surfaces of timber and managed to bring back the whole club into life. And added to that, we also extended a large 16,000 square feet sort of open kitchen zone with cafes and restaurants, which added as an extension to that space, which was all built out of timber. So my priority is not just about timber. It's about, as I mentioned, the energy measure of material. When we built a corporate office this was recently completed, 7 million square feet as VA Group, we built it for Wipro. Now, this completely has huge contents of terracotta and fly ash, which means to say when the building sort of gets back to earth, you will realize that it would, least sort of degrade the planet and biodegrade itself to the best possible method. And the whole ground that we created was done in such a way that we actually created more surface earth than that there was earth before. So these kind of number games are very important in terms of how you landscape the terraces, how you bring timber into large semi-open areas. The whole building is a veranda, where only 36% of the carpet area is actually air-conditioned and the rest of it is just open verandas, just like the old colonial buildings. And it's possible to extend this idea to corporates and very large projects and impress the client to believe in you, to bring the agenda of sustainability, not necessarily that everything has to be in timber, but has to be very, very responsible and how the whole space works. And a project which we completed a couple of years ago in Pune, which was for the Lupin Laboratories. Here, the whole perimeter skin is a composite structure of timber, aluminum, and steel. And it actually goes back and connects back to a building which is completed in RCC, which are very, very high-end laboratories. And the whole idea of bringing glass to 3 floors is also that we started planting extensive amount of landscape by giving large depths of spaces around the ground, which allows, the glass and the outdoor spaces to connect completely and not have any glare. Today, the whole building is sitting in a forest. You can't even see the building when you pass by. It's so much wooded around this landscape that you're actually sitting in a garden when you're sitting in a glass house, but looking at outdoor waterscapes and landscapes. And it was fascinating that we were more concentrating on doing these outdoor areas than the laboratories, which was actually the functional aspect of the building. But then when we went ahead and certified, it went above the grades of certification. And that becomes significantly important. Make your employees grow your vegetables, bring in enough amount of knowledge space to how you even program the functionality of the buildings to allow this kind of, connect that happens between people and the occupants and the management. And so the architect's whole game plan becomes almost equivalent to that aspect. So before I shut, I'll just quickly run through these slides, which are the large club space, which is 130 years old building as to how it was renovated. That's the existing building. Now we are adding another 2 phases to the whole structure, and we are programming a material which will be very austere and soft to this old kind of colonial buildings. What you see here is all timber that was 130 years old, pulled back, reconstructed, requalified even the floor. For example, we made sure that the flooring was reused, and whichever panels were not available, we got it recast using the same composition. The wall plasters was all done in the same composition, and we could manage to change the architecture to bring in a good reuse to the whole space and facility. We didn't change much to the exterior, but as we walked into these spaces, actually the active spaces of the club, we started working around the courtyards. There's a big opera house in the middle. So we started working with every room to re-attention a new function, re-qualify new cafes, coffee shops, new kind of ideas of the interiors, which changed and brought about a new understanding of the new age times and the present sort of physicalities that would be required to make the building, which is 130 years old, relive for another 200 or 300 years old. And all this was again done with re-engineered timber, so that you have that sense of material being very austere and not loud to an existing old fabric. And that is the structure which we built, which is 16,000 square feet, all in timber, completely all in timber, which is like a huge wing of it. We use yellow balau and sal. And this has huge spans of 14 meters where we could bolt elements of structure and erect them to come together. And it is a show kitchen where people can see their food being cooked. They can go to the chef and ask him to add a pinch of salt or pepper and walk out and sit in the cafe and the restaurant and have a great meal. And all this roof that you see and the columns and even the floor pitch and the batten structure, the rafter structure, this brick lining, and also the way the whole perimeter structure of that is being held is all part of the timber area. And these are some of the slides that show you of the interiors of the heritage building, where we had a lot of waste wood that was available out of the site. We used them again back to the floors to make furniture, to make wall panelings and extensions of wall spaces, to bring back a certain glitter of the old times, but at the same time bring in a new definition of what that architecture could read to open spaces and live spaces of such kind in an old building. And that's the big Shiva's bar, which is again completely done out of re-engineered timber and furniture, the conference rooms and the president's lounge, and of course the large opera hall, which is like a dance space, plus people play housey every week 3 times. And it's a fun space. So therefore, how do you do all this with the same timber that was there 130 years old, pulled back into position and regroup? So this tells you a story that the material timber is invincible. It will live for 1,000 years and nothing will happen, but concrete is the criminal, otherwise everything else is fine. Thank you.
That was incredible, Ravi. And I think some of the structures and some of the things that you said, I completely resonate with you as well. And I think so does Peter. He seems to be nodding his head a lot. In fact, Ravi, you also mentioned about lead points in one of your projects. So Peter, would you like to take us through, were there any lead points that you get if you work by using wood or Canadian wood in particular? And do you also offer any kind of technical assistance?
No, absolutely, because if it is, it depends on which, what's the measure of the carbon footprint. For example, what we did for Lupin or what we did even for Wipro, we got a lot of green marks because it was coming from harvested wood. Like what I tell you now is that when I use a new piece of timber, as long as I make sure that the ecological footprint is accurate, I'm actually a green boy. If I can generate power, the office that I'm sitting in right now generates 12 to 13 kV of power through solar. We are completely disconnected from KEB, from the Karnataka Electricity Board, and we feed power, to the electricity board and actually get money back. So there is a way to do that where you have to do a sort of an exchange, program. It's not about, what I used for one particular rafter or one particular batten. At the end of the day, the mathematics is very, very important. If I can grow before I die enough number of trees that would equate or be more than what I have used, I think I'm a green boy. So similar to that, most of these facilities such as Wipro and Lupin have actually graded out of gold rating to platinum, because when we got evaluation teams to come and understand how we had done the whole program, we got many marks for innovation. We got many marks for being very, very passive in most of the areas where 40 to 50% of the whole space is not air conditioned. We did innovative systems of ventilation. So there are the aspect of doing, of course, today we are focused looking at Peter, but having said that, the way we approach green is a much more sort of megalomaniac possible kind of an arena, and we all have to sort of get off that space and become more responsible. And talking to the farmer and asking him to grow your rice is beautiful, or to grow your rice and consume is beautiful. So you grow your own tree and build a tree house. That's beautiful, you know.
Absolutely. I think, Peter, he's answered your question. Would you like to add to that as well?
I could, nothing I can add to that. It was an amazing answer and yeah, perfectly well put. A wonderful presentation, Ravindra. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think we're running out of time, so I'm just going to take the final notes from everybody. Mr. Joseph, would you like to summarize your thoughts on using wood, particularly in the projects that you've done? And if you have a message for people who've come here to listen to you.
Nothing more. It's being sincere to yourself and to the world we are living in. I think our resources are, the way we use our resources, which are very limited, we have to be careful. Like, and whatever we do, I mean, we can talk a lot. At the end of it, you know, it is being sincere to the environment. I think that's all.
Absolutely. Mr. Chatterji, anything, any message for the young architects here today?
I mean, just be gentle.
Siddhartha.
I think just the fact that I think we all are so lucky to get the kind of projects we get, and it comes with the responsibility of doing something and, you know, being just treading gently and responsibly. I think just that.
Absolutely agree with you. Mr. Eugene Pandala, any final notes for our audience today?
This is all about what you're talking about. It's all about, you know, aiming at sustainability, you know, using timber as a building, important building material. Yeah, but I mean, we have to make everything affordable, you know, because the need of the hour is to, we are aiming at something, you know, for 2030, 2050, you know, carbon footprint. So if it reaches only 5% of the population, you know, with kind of green rating and rated green building, other buildings are not sustainable. That's what somebody claims. But of course, all kind of sustainability is to be welcomed. You know, you can have green rated building for people who can afford it. Say, for example, platinum rated or gold rated buildings. All these things is good to talk about, but that is just not the point, because we have timeline is very important. You know, we have to make our all the building projects. There's a lot of questions today. Is architecture, World Architecture Day. There's a lot of questions now. You know, new questions are coming up. How do architects respond to this kind of responsible situation? Because lifestyle modification is what everyone is talking about. You cannot talk about a bedroom with 150 square feet or 500 square feet. You know, we have to think logically, because we have to make reasonable, help to the environment. We just can't. We have to be affordable, in short, and we should make it affordable for everyone. Then only we can achieve this aim of reducing the carbon footprint by 2030 to certain levels. By 2050 also we have certain milestones. We have to achieve that. So we have to ask a lot of questions, and find answers for it.
Absolutely. Arjun, any closing notes and any message for architects who want to work with wood?
Yeah, I can tell you one thing, that wood isn't a get out of jail free card, right? It's relevant to a context. So you can't make a structure in wood and then sheathe it completely in glass and say, okay, my structure is sustainable, right? It's I think if you're going to kind of acclimatize yourself to what Ini said, first of all, be gentle. I think that's the primary thing. If you have a sympathy for the environment and for the ecology around you, whether it's cultural or social or anything related to our immediate environment, I think the answers kind of will present themselves. I'd be very, very cautious, because we are more and more, trying to get the stamp of sustainability, which I'll say it again in a country like ours could be a bit of a red herring, right? Because I always look at buildings that are clad completely in glass and I think, how the hell could you possibly get a platinum rating on that building? Right? There's no sense of orientation. So you create a problem, then you start throwing, triple laminated and quadruple laminated glass, and then you put in efficient air conditioning systems. But the point is, you create this problem and then you try and solve it. Maybe if you thought about things in a more common sense way, and I think we have an immense repository of accumulated intelligence in this country, right? Decades, centuries old, which is telling us how we can build sympathetically for different environments, right? Now, I'm not saying we all go around building mud huts, right? But there is something to be learned from all of that can be applied in the mainstream across larger scales, right? So each thing in its own context. The point is, architects, universities, industry, we get together, we start to find solutions, right? If we simply become, operate in silos and become guinea pigs for, the industry, there's always going to be a disconnect, right? So yeah, I guess that's a little bit I have to say.
That was fantastic. Peter, any final words before we wrap up the session today?
I'm fighting a bit with my neighbour's renovation, but I would just like to say a couple of things about cost. This has been raised a number of times about affordability, and I think when you think about affordability, it's not just the upfront cost of wood. It's all about installed cost. It's about how quickly you can build in wood, how you can prefabricate in wood, and you can very much reduce your footprint on the site where you're building. So you use less footings, less concrete, less foundation, less disturbance, less water. You build more quickly, you prefabricate, you transport to site. You can build on steep sites, mountainous sites, at the end of narrow tracks, on beach fronts. These are all eminently wonderful ways to use wood in construction. And it can be used in such a way affordably. It doesn't necessarily need to be so expensive. So I'd just like to leave people with that message. And another message also might be that, the strength to weight ratio of wood is incredibly high. It's equivalent to steel or better. And any structure you saw today, any structure you saw presented today can be done 100% in wood. And we can do very long spans in wood. We can substitute concrete with wood. We can substitute steel with wood. So there's no impediment. And as long as we keep the environment in mind and we draw the wood from environmentally responsibly managed, forests such as we have in Canada, and we do it, in a sensible way, in a simple way, and we design well. Everything, it's all about design, whether it's termites or water mitigation or structural values or orientations, all about design, and all of those things can be mitigated in wood very easily, very simply. So that's probably the message that I would leave with you today. And thanks very much for a wonderful session. Thanks.
That was fantastic. Ravi, before we sign off, last words?
Pablo Neruda told his girlfriend, said, I want to do to you what the wind does to the cherry trees. So we need to kind of shake the goddamn tree and make it vibrant and alive and wake up. And that's how he expressed his passion to his girl. So I think as architects, we need to kind of reinvent, go back to our books and papers and pages and history and sort of relearn and emerge into a new ideation of empathy and be austere and reduce use. So I think these are very, very pertinent to our times, and to be what I want to ideate is very, very important, to live and, grow up to the spaces and the things, and what I do in the evening should be as responsible as I propagate to life. I think if we do that, we will be an amazing life to live by further on.
On that note, that was incredible. And on that note, I think it's time to conclude the discussion. I think we've established today that it's time we all start making changes to the way we build and design, so all of us can be proud of what we are leaving back for our future generations as well. I sincerely thank each of our panelists for joining us today. It was a very good discussion, and we hope to have many more like this in the future as well. Just before we sign off, I'd like to invite Nirmala to make the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Sumisha. I'll not take much of your time, but it was certainly a very engaging panel discussion. I truly also believe we have a commitment to our future generations. I just, on behalf of Canadian Wood, would like to thank Architect Arjun Malik, Architect Eugene Pandala, Architect Ini Chatterji, Architect Ravindra Kumar, Designer Siddhartha Das, Architect Tony Joseph, Peter Bradfield representing Canadian Wood, Thank you, Annabelle, for bearing with us with all this time. And of course, Sumisha, for an excellent moderation. Thank you very much for taking time out and attending this. I hope to see you all soon. Thank you.